So, my opinions on 2.2 so far are very mixed. There's a lot of stuff I really like, but also a lot of stuff I think completely misses the mark. A plier. I don't know why I made that joke. Anyway, strap yourself in, I guess. I'm going to make this as comprehensive as I care to make it, and I like to think I'm pretty dedicated. To begin with, I think we should have a look at the new RobTop level, Dash. I have heard some discourse about the name of the level. The fact that it comes right after Finger Dash is a little awkward, but I don't know. I think the existence of Geometrical Dominator as a baseline for the worst level name makes it inoffensive to me. Dash is fine as a level name. Speaking of Geometrical Dominator, I feel that level also sets a baseline for the worst RobTop level in general, and Dash easily clears that too. Although I don't think it's that great. For the most part, it's just okay. At the same time, it doesn't inspire much in me either. Honestly, it's just kind of boring. I think the pixel aesthetic just doesn't really gel with me. It feels kind of generic when Geometry Dash has always had a pretty unique look to it. There's also a lot of little gameplay quirks that irk me about this level. Let's go through them in chronological order. 1. I'm lifting this opinion straight from GD colon, but the first spider part is a terrible way to introduce the direction change mechanic. It's chaotic, it's needlessly confusing. As an introduction to the mechanic, it just fails spectacularly. It's baffling to me because in the past, RobTop has been really good about introducing new mechanics in his levels. And as the developer, it's his responsibility to do exactly that. Secondly, here's a quick question. Just by looking at the screenshot, and with just your knowledge about Geometry Dash at your disposal, what will this yellow jump ring do? This? Or this? Obviously, this is the right answer, right? Wrong. You buffoon. You utter fucking dumbass. No! Turns out the teleportal actually sneakily switches your gravity without any visual indicator. And I really hate that. Like, the whole reason we all memorized a million different jump rings and portals is because it lets us understand exactly what is supposed to happen and how to act accordingly. I've had my fair share of deaths at this specific jump ring simply because I was stunned that the opposite of what I expected to happen, happened. And to be totally fair, Deadlock did it first, but it was wrong then, too. Lastly, the final part of the level has a lot of downtime where you're not really doing anything, just waiting for the next section to happen. And it's just awkward. I don't know. This is kind of a minor gripe in comparison, but I really felt the weight of the dead air hanging over the level when I played this part. So yeah, the weird gameplay decisions in Dash really drag it down for me. I didn't even bring up the green floors that show up exactly once and never again. Or the absence of size portals in favor of potions? That's why? There's a lot of questionable design choices made by RobTop here. As an introduction to all the new features of the update, I wish we got something better. Speaking of which, how about that swing game mode, huh? For a long time in this community, Swingcopter referred to this jank-ass gimmick with the dual ball. It never felt good to me. The acceleration is just way too quick. It feels incredibly volatile to control. It had me worried about the swing game mode because I thought it would feel mostly the same, but I was pleasantly surprised by how good it feels. It feels more weighty, it has more momentum to it, which makes it feel a lot more satisfying to control. It's like riding a bike after all you've known in life are unicycles, which means the mini swing is like riding a very tiny bicycle, I guess. Anyway, I'm happy to say that Swingcopter is now dead. Long live the swing. Purple jump pads and jump rings are also awesome. There's not really much to say about them, just wanted to briefly acknowledge them. They allow for a lot of interesting gameplay options. Another new gameplay feature is the direction change gimmick, or the arrow trigger, which my personal theory on this mechanic is that it was initially developed for platformer mode, and then later also added to the main game. The reason I think this is the case is because it definitely seems to be tailor-made for platformer mode. It works really well in that mode, but in the main game, a lot of the time it doesn't feel quite right. The countdown section in Dash does it well, but every other part doesn't really have a good indicator for it, in my view. If I hadn't seen the trailer, I'm sure the stairs part would also have confused the hell out of me. The last gameplay feature I want to talk about is the camera controls. This is something I've actually wanted for a long time. There have been a number of times where the default camera doesn't quite do what I want it to. It doesn't handle vertical movement very well, for example, which leads to frustrating off-screen jumps. If you look at Planet X, for example, that level trends downward the whole time, and it makes it difficult to sight read because the upcoming parts are just off-screen. I think this is an instance where camera controls can serve a very practical purpose. A lot of levels use them more for cinematic purposes, which I guess is fine, but in a way it kind of reminds me of the shake trigger in that it's very susceptible to becoming overused. Just be mindful of this when you do use it, because it wouldn't surprise me if some people got motion sick over it, you know? Now, there are a shit ton more editor features that I could go over, but I'll keep it brief. To be honest, I haven't even figured out how to use half of this stuff, but I know the area triggers are crazy useful from the little bit of testing I've done with them. He's feeling bonely. Let's give him a friend. There you go. Now let's make him kiss. Mwah. You can now warp objects to any shape and size you want. There's a half block move button. Basically, there's just a lot more stuff to work with. All of these are super cool additions that vastly expand the capabilities of the level editor in a good way. Finally, I want to go over the new aesthetic RobTop has introduced with 2.2, and that is the pixel blocks. I'm pretty sure the number of decorative objects was straight up doubled this update, and it's just 30 tabs of pixel blocks. Oh, and the difficulty faces. Can't forget those. Man, I can't wait until Bald EVW makes it into the game officially. Anyway, pixel blocks. I'm not going to tell you that they look bad per se. In fact, I think they look pretty appealing. However, one thing you can't really get around with them is that they are very, like, finished. There's not a whole lot you can do with them besides change their color. What this means is that levels that use these blocks tend to look very similar, to the point of becoming indistinguishable. They don't allow for that much creativity, because these blocks pretty much design themselves. You just put them down and you're basically done. You can thank these guys for the steady influx of levels as of late, because they make creating levels relatively easy, but as a result they do look very generic. We'll probably see people use these a lot less as time goes on. And that covers everything in the 2.2 update. There's not a single feature I missed. Ugh. Fine, I'll address the elephant in the room. I already made a separate video about platformer mode, but that was specifically about platformer mode as a concept. I didn't really discuss how it actually plays in practice. So let's go over the tower levels and the controls of this new game mode. Okay, so first things first. How does it actually feel to play? As you guys may know, I'm kind of a connoisseur when it comes to platformer games. I've played a lot of them over the course of my life, and in my experience, a platformer game lives and dies by its controls. Great level design cannot save something that just doesn't work on a fundamental level. And being completely fair here, platformer mode feels fine. It's okay. It's easy to tell, though, that the different game modes were all repurposed for platformer mode. It wasn't built from the ground up to be a platformer game. And while I don't really have any glaring complaints, it doesn't feel that great either. It doesn't hold a candle to the immaculate control scheme of a game like Celeste, which feels incredibly satisfying. Part of the reason Geometry Dash falls short is because it is, at its core, still a mobile game, which severely limits its scope of inputs. Left, right, jump. Add any more, and controlling the game on a touchscreen becomes a major pain. Even 2D Mario games, which notoriously stick to a very simple control scheme, have more depth to them than that. You've got separate buttons for running and jumping. You can ground pound by pointing the joystick down, and many would argue it really needs a separate button for picking up objects as well. Platformer mode just isn't that mechanically interesting. It's functional, sure, but uninspiring. I feel the same way about the tower levels. They're just not all that interesting to me. There are some certified funny moments, but overall the general gameplay experience just doesn't really do it for me. I do have to bring up the coins though, specifically the speedrun coins. They're fine in concept, but the execution is so bad. Some of these levels have extremely long cutscenes, and because you have to play every attempt from the very beginning when you're trying to go for a speedrun, going for these coins means you'll have to sit through these cutscenes every time. That gets old very quickly. Before we move on to more miscellaneous features and changes, one minor point about platformer mode that relates to my previous video about it. People in the comments were very adamant about the whole just don't play platformer levels thing. And rest assured, I'm not going to, but I think I need to clarify a little what I meant, because my explanation wasn't the best in retrospect. I described the Geometry Dash editor as a tool, and the way tools are designed affect the way people use them. For example, a hammer is weighty and blunt. When you hold it in your hand, you intuitively understand you're supposed to hit things with it. The same goes for creative tools like the GD editor, and you can see the effects of this by the kinds of levels people made with every update. What I'm worried about is that there will be a lot fewer levels that really take advantage of the music integration that is so integral to this game. It used to be the case that you were forced to stick to the song you chose and tailor your level specifically to it. It gave everyone an intuitive understanding that music sync is vitally important to this game. Now though, you can just make a platformer level. You can just change songs on a dime or add a bunch of sound effects. You don't have to worry that much about making sure your level and the song you chose come together nicely. You're no longer forced to work around this limitation anymore, which will harm creativity. I'm all for creative freedom, but I think people are quick to forget that limitations are also something that inspire creativity. Obviously, good creators will still make good levels, but it used to be the case that mediocre creators could also make a good level every once in a while too, because the editor subtly guided them into doing so, because the way it was designed as a tool allowed them to intuitively understand that. That's why I advocated for these two modes to be separated, because they're different tools for different purposes, and making that clear by their design is only ever a good thing. There were a few people who would jump on my ass for this take, saying that nobody would buy Platformer if it were sold separately, but I just don't believe you. Platformer is super popular, it would sell well. I think people don't fully realize how much of a steal $4 for Geometry Dash really is. Like, it's actually criminal how cheap this game is for how much depth there is to it. Selling Platformer modes separately is no problem whatsoever. It's worth the measly $4 even in its current state. Another advantage of this that I forgot to mention is that it would decouple the development cycles for both modes. It would allow RobTop to add features specifically for Platformer mode and normal mode separately, because right now any changes to Platformer need to also take normal mode into account and vice versa. That's why RobTop had to change the slope physics, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, I think that's enough rambling about Platformer mode for a lifetime. I'm sure I'll bring it up again in the future though. I will make sure my complaints are heard, whether you like it or not. There are still a bunch of miscellaneous changes and features we still need to go over, and for a change of pace, let's start with something I really like. I think lists are an underappreciated addition in this update. They serve as such a good way to promote level discovery, and they provide a good incentive to play harder levels and get better at the game. It's like a community version of map hacks and gauntlets, but because lists can be a lot bigger than those, a list can be more of a long-term project, something you tackle on and off, gradually working your way up. Of course, there's also room for smaller lists and easier lists that stick to more of a theme. The possibilities are really endless. One of the first lists I played is Dream Sequencer by J-Ghost, and I think it's a great example of what it can offer. It has 10 levels with a roughly similar theme that slowly build up to the final challenge. It's nothing too crazy, just an easy demon level called In My Mind that I'd never heard of before, but I really fell in love with it when I played it. It feels like such a small thing, but I think this feature, more than anything else, is what will keep me playing levels. More than the paths and the daily chests and the quests and whatever else RobTop is going to add next to make the game look like a microtransaction hellscape, except without the microtransactions. This is what turns people into star grinders. Those poor, unfortunate souls. Your thirst for blood shards continues? Like, I'm not the only one who thinks all these reward systems add a ton of unnecessary bloat to the game, right? Yeah, I don't really care much for the paths and the shops and all that stuff. It feels like these features exist simply to keep you clicking buttons and not so much playing levels. It's superficial. Lists are the complete opposite of that. Of course, lists also have rewards, but even without them, I think they have inherent value. I'll keep playing a list even after I've beaten enough levels to claim the reward. Speaking of shops, by the way, why is normal practice music a purchasable item? And why is it so expensive? It should just be an option in your settings. I don't get this choice at all. Like, You're forcing new players to listen to elevator music when they practice, when that doesn't help their timings at all. Like, there's a reason people used practice music hacks so much. It gives you an advantage when practicing. I mean, you said it yourself. Listen to the music to help time your jumps, right? Gaining that advantage behind an in-game currency feels so gross, dude. I know there aren't actually microtransactions in the game, but come on, man. There's no reason to force players to grind all those diamonds just to unlock something that should be accessible when you first open the game. Oh, it's more than anything, I'm just flabbergasted by this decision. We're nearing the end now, so I'm going to rattle off a few minor things before I dive into the final big change this update. First, I've seen a few people complain about the new achievements, and I mean, there are a few wacky achievements to be sure, but I honestly think it's fine. It gives you something to work towards, I guess. I don't see myself as an achievement hunter anyway. I'm not bothered by not having all the achievements. I'm still at 119 out of 120 on the Steam achievements, and probably will be forever. Second, the new ratings. Legendary and Mythic. Arguing about what rating a level deserves is a tradition in this community as old as the game itself, and I'm sure this will only increase those arguments. But like, it's all subjective anyway, right? Just because RobTop stamps a level with his seal of approval doesn't mean that much to me, because I disagree with his ratings all the time anyway, as do a lot of people, clearly. I guess it's nice to give creators a few more creator points, but I feel like if you really care about that, you're making levels for the wrong reasons anyway. I guess I just don't really see the point. This is a pointless feature in my view. Okay, I think that leaves only one more thing I want to discuss for this video, and that is the physics changes. Let's not forget about those. They were the talk of the town before the update dropped, after all. But now platformer mode has taken center stage as the main point of discussion, which I did contribute to be fair, but let me shift focus back to this issue now. In 2.2, the ticks per second were standardized, which is what people were mainly concerned about, but it also changed a bunch of physics and fixed a bunch of bugs and gameplay quirks. Things like upside down ship physics and the super jump for the robot, for example, as well as the new slope physics. And it's that second thing that ended up really mattering with this update's release, because I think RobTop really dropped the ball on this one. There are two possible options that make sense in my mind. Either you don't change the physics at all for the sake of consistency, or you do change the physics but you implement a legacy physics feature so old levels don't break in the process. Being honest, I prefer just keeping it the same because I value consistency a lot, but RobTop decided to go the other way, and like, fair enough, I guess. But if you're going to do that, you have to make sure that the old physics still apply to the old levels, and that's where RobTop massively fucked up, because for some reason the legacy physics either don't work or they don't apply to all the changes RobTop made, most notably the slope physics. This is kind of a personal gripe for me, but two of my levels became completely impossible to beat after the update. There's this jump in Edge of the Universe where you jump off the floor as it moves down in the duel, narrowly getting out of the way of the spikes. And I really love this jump. It may seem like a minor thing, but to me, it's part of this level's identity. And the update completely broke it. I had to put invisible blocks here to fix it. And that feels so fucking bad, dude. You're making me compromise on my creative vision because you messed up the legacy physics options. I really don't like this. On top of that is the fact that a lot of other levels became impossible too. And now RobTop is assembling an elite team of moderators to go fix it manually. And it's like the worst solution he could have devised. I know the Geometry Dash community doesn't really care about creative integrity, but messing around with other people's levels just feels really wrong to me. Like, I wouldn't let the mods touch my levels, that's for sure. They don't know what I want my levels to be. But beyond that, even besides the moral problems with it, it's an impossible task to begin with. Because how are you going to find every single level that's broken? Or even how are you going to find every single rated level that's broken? Because there are a lot of levels that don't really get that many plays anymore. And that just means if you go to play an older level, it becomes a fucking lottery whether or not it's going to be actually possible or not. At best, it's a Sisyphean task. We really got the worst of both worlds here with the physics changes. We get no consistency between old and new levels, but also a bunch of old levels are broken now, about to be defaced in order to fix a mistake RobTop made in the first place. It's so frustrating. Having to change my levels is annoying because I made them the way I did for a reason, you know? This jump is deliberate. I shouldn't have to change this. RobTop should have just implemented legacy physics properly like everyone assured me he would. God! Okay, Rant over. All in all, there's a lot wrong with this update. At the same time though, there's a lot to love too. I have never felt this conflicted about a GD update before. I thought about covering the new gauntlets, but I might do that in a future video. I think there's set to be a bunch of new ones as the update progresses anyway, so maybe then. Either way, thanks for sticking with me to the end. Let me know what you think about the update in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Special shoutouts to my grandpa demons on Patreon, Xkami, Belfry Clock, and Alpheria. And thanks for watching, everyone. Next video will be the creator contest results. See you then.